Evening, and thank you for joining us for this virtual presentation. I'm Annie Harris, and I'm Director of Essex Heritage. And this is the first of three conversations in this year's, with this winter's Redefining Heritage program. Let me just stop for a second because this has just obscured my notes. A few notes before we begin. There are live captions available if you would like. They're in the menu at the bottom of your screen. You select closed caption and then hit show subtitle if you want to enable these closed captions. And if you want to turn them off, just hit hide subtitle. Following the presentation, there will be a question and answer with the presenters. We ask you to please submit your questions in the chat box. And we're also going to try to open this up for live questions. So when we get that point, please raise your hand and we'll call on you for live questions. And then finally, this presentation is being recorded and we will make it available on the Essex Heritage YouTube website channel. And there'll be Spanish subtitles available in the recordings on YouTube. And we will also provide a link to the recording to everybody who signed up tonight. So if you want to hear it again or you weren't able to get in, you can listen to it. We'll send it to you. Now for the program. So Redefining Heritage is a discussion series that Essex Heritage presents. Its purpose is to explore a variety of perspectives on topics related to natural, cultural, and historic resources that are found within the Essex National Heritage Area, which is also Essex County, North Shore of Boston, and Lower Merrimack Valley. Although many people consider that the history and natural environment and historic structures in this region are unchanging, in reality, as I think many of you know, they're changing all the time. And the heritage resources are being re-examined and reinterpreted. And that's what we want to do in this series, is to make that reinterpretation and reexamination accessible to you, and hope that you find it stimulating and also helps get you engaged in all the ways that you can be more involved and actively engaged in this really wonderful region. So tonight's program will highlight the Faceless Dolls Project. And I really apologize, I can't really pronounce the name. So I'm going to leave that to Jeanette, who can pronounce it beautifully, but I will use the English name for Faceless Dolls Project. And again, my apologies. It is a creative and educational arts initiative, and it was started by the Punto Urban Art Museum, which is a program with the North Shore Community Development Corporation, which is based in Salem, but they also in other parts of the North Shore. This project was inspired by traditional faceless dolls made by Liliana Mera Limé, an artist and a pottery worker from the town of Moca in the Dominican Republic. And the project invites individuals to combine creativity and narrative through the creation of unique paper dolls in a few basic steps. It's a celebration of heritage and storytelling to help preserve the diverse identities that reside in El Punto, which is also known as the Salem Point neighborhood. This particular project we're going to talk about tonight was begun in the spring of 2021, when the Punto Urban Art Museum and Salem Maritime National Historic Site got together to run a series of workshops that were run virtually and in person at the North Shore CDC's community space. And each workshop has involved three components: a storytelling, design component, and also a building component. The storytelling portion allows the participants to answer prompts about their own heritage and how they perceive elements of their heritage through their senses and memories. The participants then translate these memories and stories into drawings and designs and words, which they form into a paper doll template. And then lastly, the participants all build their own doll into its three-dimensional form, finishing it with the iconic faceless head. The North Shore CDC's goal is to grow the Faceless Dolls Project over time to foster gathering, celebrating, and honoring community stories, It also serves as a way for neighbors and friends to get to know each other. And before this meeting started tonight, I heard that there's already some faceless dolls up in Lawrence, some larger ones in sculpture. So I think this is really going to be spread very broadly around this region. The North Shore CDC partnered with the National Park Service to co-create an exhibit featuring these dolls and stories by residents. And this year it was at the Visitor Center in Salem, and I hear that there are plans to move it to other places as well, maybe including the Lynn Art Museum, which would be great. And so we have two speakers tonight, Nora Halloran, who is with the National Park Service. She's an education ranger at Salem Maritime and Saugus Ironworks National Historic Sites. Nora joined the education team at Salem Maritime in 2018. Her primary focus is interpretation education in the history of slavery in Essex County. She's originally from California, and Nora has worked in national parks across the country for 10 years. And prior to arriving in Massachusetts, she worked in Everglades National Park in Florida. Our other speaker is Jeanette Gusman, and she is a designer and multidisciplinary artist and an advocate who cares passionately about community engagement. Jeanette works at the North Shore Community Development Corporation, where she spearheads the Punto Urban Art Museum, which is a unique outdoor gallery of murals displayed on the walls throughout the neighborhood. At the museum, she curates and manages new and existing murals. Jeanette's goal is to build a deeply connected art museum that not only represents the community, but also is community-made. And her future focus is to bring more immersive and special exhibit works to the Punta Art Museum to narrate the stories of the residents of the Point neighborhood and expand from murals to sculptures. Before joining the CDC, Jeanette worked at the offices of the architect Moshe Safdie, and she developed three-dimensional architectural models, and she led the digital computing tools for the model making team. She was there for more than 10 years. Jeanette is an immigrant herself from the Dominican Republic, and she believes in giving back to the community through mission-directed work, especially collaborating with local partners and leading local church groups. In her free time, if you have any free time, she explores creative ideas, making art, which is in different media, including 3D sculptures, acrylic paintings, and laser-cut digital drawings. She holds a BFA in architecture from the Massachusetts College of Art and Design. So with that, I'd really like to turn the meeting over to Jeanette and Nora for their very interesting presentation tonight. Thank you so much for coming. And thank you, Nora, and thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you, Annie. That was beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. There's not much left to say, but we do have a presentation. But today, Nora and I wanted to invite you to participate in a 5 cents heritage exercise, because this is one of the exercises we did to do during workshops to get people's creative juices flowing, to bring up to memory what our upbringing was like, our heritage is like, and we are inviting you to participate today. But not only that, but we're also inviting the group to participate to co-create a word cloud together. So this is how it goes. So with the 5 senses, we're going to remember what we see, feel, what we hear, what we smell, and what we taste. And this is related to heritage. So one example is, when I think about my heritage, I see the colors red, white, and blue that represent the Dominican flag. I feel the warmth, hot sun of the Caribbean air. I hear salsa and merengue in the background as I'm cleaning the house. I smell my mom's cooking and her sazon in the kitchen. And I taste the tostones that my uncle made for me for lunch today. So these are ways to use the 5 senses to remember or to bring up heritage that is only uniquely to you or where you come from. So this is an invitation for all of us to collaborate in that. In the next slide, just kind of goes over it again. But then I will also like to share, and Nora's going to put a link on the chat, and we're going to explore. I want everyone that's joined us today to take some time to think about what we hear, what we see, what we smell, what we taste, regarding our heritage. So the link should be already shared on the chat. And so let's try to think about this. So if I am responding to this, I would say what I hear is a salsa music or merengue music. So you can type it in on the link. Is anybody able to get into the link?
Yes. Yep.
So when I think about when everybody thinks about their heritage, what can they remember? What they smell, what you taste, and as soon as we type in a few words, it will start populating together on the screen.
Just what we see is the first thing, or do we type all 5 of them into this?
You can start with what you see first, or what you hear.
I mean, are we going to go through each one separately, or is it all going to be in this one?
We can do it. Well, let me guide you through it. So let's start with what I see. When I think about my heritage, I see the ocean, apples, trees, waves, redwood, the coast. Oh. And if you see that the words get larger, it's because multiple people have put in the same word. So that's some of the things that are correlating to each other in this one. So let's move on to I feel. When I think about my heritage, I feel. Family, yeah. Salt, the city. Now let's move on to the taste. When I think about my heritage, this is what my palate tells me. Fools. Waiting to see if pizza pops up here. Biscuits, yeah, sounds tasty. All right, then let's move on to the next one. When I think about my heritage, I smell. What does home smell like to you guys? Very nice. And then finally, when I think about my heritage, what do we hear? calm. You're dancing. Excellent. Well, thank you so much. As we see, we have now participated in a collectively moment of creating and bringing forth our heritage and remembering. And some of this exercise is what we actually did doing workshops, allowing people to remember the heritage and bring forth, put this in the forefront in their mind, because we wanted people to think about where they come from, what is home, and what is things that are dear to their hearts. And we wanted them to be able to tell that and share that through the creation of a faceless doll. So I'll actually pause, stop sharing, and then we can go back to the presentation, Laura, please. So as Annie mentioned beautifully earlier, my name is Jeanette Guzman, and I work at North Shore CDC. North Shore CDC is based in Salem, Massachusetts, right next to downtown Salem. And we invest in neighborhoods to create thriving communities through real estate, youth development, community engagement, and art and placemaking. And then, well, how do we land to the Muñecas in Rostro conversation in the first place? So I want to walk you through a little bit how we arrived there. Next slide. So the Punto Urban Art Museum, we have about 65 to 70 murals that are large scale around the community of El Punto and Salem. And the purpose of this project was to build and foster community pride in the neighborhood, to increase economic development, and to bring opportunity for local businesses, and to raise consciousness about social issues. And that we call as an effort to break down the social economic barriers between downtown Salem, when we had a lot of people from Salem not come down through experience the businesses or know much about the community. The museum has kind of brought up this excuse to enter, walk through, learn about art, but it also lets you experience the community and build kind of like a positive experience about being there, other than what people sometimes hear on the news is only negative things being reported. But when people experience and they go through the artwork and they're curious, they walk around, they have a better idea of the community. But it also brings pride in the people that live there. So youth in this community are more likely to invite you over to their community to say, hey, I live in the building that has the big bird on it, or the big chrome dog, or has this huge mural that it's very colorful. And so people are really excited to invite others into their community. So we're really excited that on the 5 years that the Punto Urban Art Museum has been in Salem, in the Point neighborhood specifically, we've seen that wall broken down and the communities are working a little bit more together and visiting each other and participating. Next slide. And the Point neighborhood, as you see, is very, very close to downtown Salem. You can see there up north on the top, the location. It's a historically immigrant hub, previously French, Polish, Swedish, and now mostly Latin Americans. It's a very family-oriented community, is affordable for people that live there. Feels like home to many residents that live there. That's where their family and friends are. That's where their food is, that are Latino. That's where they can find their special items at the grocery store that are familiar to them. So it's a very family-oriented community, and it's very rich in culture. It's actually 63% diverse. A majority of this is residents from the Dominican Republic that reside here. And so that brings us up to the next slide, where we want to, because it's a highly densely populated community in Salem, we wanted to kind of like give the opportunity to have this artwork bring you out to the parks in the community. And so with a collaboration with Palmer Cove Park, which I'll talk about a little bit later, we wanted to design some artwork that would go on parks and it would really feel like the park belongs to the people that live in the community. So we know that the parks are really important in Salem, and specifically in the Point, because people see more break than they do see nature on a daily basis. So we want to have parks that are fun, that are exciting, that feel like me, that feel like them, that feel like us, that feel like we belong to, so that people feel really invited and welcome to go to the parks in the community. Next slide. And that's how we ended up at the Muñecas sin Rostro. So we were looking for some artwork that could be representative, that could be very diverse, that could represent other demographics, like, you know, some sculptures that could bring in artwork as well, that can look very vibrant. So we know that Latin American is a very vibrant, colorful cultures all mixed together. So we wanted to make sure that the artwork had that feature to it. And so we learned that, you know, there's a lot of beautiful sculptures. For example, in Chicago, the lighthouses, they build this sculpture and the artists were able to intervene them, and people were able to learn about the artists, but also they were very curious to go see, once you found one sculpture, you were curious to go find the other one. For example, the Muñecas Limé in Dominican Republic here, you can see it was a traveling exhibit, and where the dolls went as a collaboration, people went. So people wanted to go see where they were, and they wanted to take selfies with them, and they were very curious. So we love this idea of finding some artwork that would be really, truly representative of the culture, but also attention seeking, and it would get people excited to go see them. Next slide. And that is how we decided to work with the Dominican Faceless Doll. As you see here, Dominican Faceless Doll is a small figurine made out of ceramic, 6 to 12 inches, was created by Liliana Mera Limé in 1981. She wanted to depict a small figure of a woman, and at that time, they didn't have a lot of tools to recreate her face over and over again, as this was a pottery shop that creates kind of like a marketplace for the public, and they couldn't replicate that same face over and over. And it was a struggle, but that same struggle I led them to just leave it faceless, and that has become like the iconic, most attractive and interesting piece about the doll, that it leaves you wondering who this woman represent. As you know, Dominican culture is a very diverse. We have a lot of different races mixing together, and so throughout the years, next slide, we have seen artists portray these dolls in different ways. Because she doesn't have a face, then it becomes like, well, I can allow her to be whoever I want. So we've seen her portrayed as a wife, as a street vendor, as a mother, as a farm worker, a caretaker, a little girl, a niñas, or as a breadwinner here with Donkey. So we just love the idea that this doll has almost become like this blank canvas for anyone whose hand it lands on to say, who do I want her to be? What do I want to represent? And so we kind of like tapped into that earlier on in the project and decided to create this as an educational project that not only teaches people about this Dominican icon, but also give them the opportunity to have them be the storytellers, the ones that defines what is her skin color, what is her profession, how old is she, what does she do for a living. And so that's why this specific icon was really interesting for us, and we were really excited to work with it. Next slide. And so we came up with a paper template and a way to make this equitable, affordable, accessible, and simple as possible. We made a very simple paper template that could give you a paper doll in a few basic steps. So we actually piloted this a few times. We made it, we started playing around with the shapes and the forms and how to make her stand, how to make her simple, like how to make simple adjustments to lock the paper on itself, how to get it, can people download it at home and print it? Can they make this whole doll out of paper? And so we actually managed to do that with this paper template, and we have some simple instructions. And on the right here is one of like the first test dolls that I created here in my house during the pandemic, playing around with paper and scissors. And we were able to achieve this very simple doll that you see here on the right. And then we have the Youth Build program at North Shore CDC, and we were looking for kind of like the first opportunity to bring people together after the pandemic and do some artistic collaborations during that time. So in June 2021, we did the, at the Youthville Women's Group, we did the pilot program, building the dolls, and it was a success. We learned that people not only were excited about kind of thinking about what stories they want to share, but also that it was pretty easy for them to do. So it wasn't like limiting, or it wasn't too complex for people to achieve. And so once we realized that this was an easy, doable project, we realized, okay, let's take it to the next step. Next slide. And these are some examples of dolls that were generated. Sila and Sophia are between 3 and 4 years old. And with some simple assistance from an adult, they were able to put the doll together, but you can see that they decorated themselves. Sila also added a very cute purse here on the left. She hangs a little purse on the doll. And Sophia adds a very long ponytail, just kind of like her hair. Tatiana Rivas on the right also was the first person to kind of like take it and represent herself in the doll. And she figured out how to make an afro for the doll. She put a fruit basket on the top of her head, and she actually made sure that the skin was showing brown like her own skin. And so that was really beautiful to see, again, how this doll represented the opportunity for Tatiana to share a story that we'll actually learn a little bit more further down in this presentation. Next slide. And at that point, you know, we were very lucky to get connected with Nora, and the Salem Maritime partnership began because I think at that time they had some internship opportunities for some youth to come and work with us and connect to the community. And so it was a really great timing to be able to begin this idea of collaborating, doing workshops, even creating a small video of how to build the doll so that people that were remotely, specifically during the pandemic, they could download the instructions, they could watch the video, and they could make their own doll at home. But it became a lot more than that. And so now I would like to pass it on to Nora, who's going to talk a little bit more about what took place after we merged and collaborated and how the project just grew immensely with the collaboration.
Thank you, Jeanette. So my name is Nora Halloran, and like Annie said, I'm the Education Park Ranger at Salem Maritime and Saugus Ironworks National Historic Sites. So we're 2 units of the National Park Service. And in Salem, we had been in conversations with North Shore CDC since about 2020 to brainstorm ways we could leverage resources and expand capacity. And that's eventually what brought us here today. But to back up and just give a little background about the park. So Salem Maritime is in the downtown Salem area. You might recognize us for Friendship of Salem, which is a large replica ship on Derby Wharf or at Derby Beach. But the park was designated in 1938, and it was primarily to tell stories of 18th century maritime trade and the creation of a global economy and culture and these global connections in Salem stemming from maritime trade. And those stories have traditionally been told primarily from a white and from a male perspective. And they have also primarily focused on stories of success and achievement, while then ignoring experiences and stories of injustice. So the National Park Service, as really a whole agency, has really recognized that as an agency, we need to do a better job telling more inclusive stories and histories. And that is to give a more accurate reflection of our nation's history and culture. And with that, you know, really comes recognizing that history did not stop in the 18th century or stop at our park's property line. It's continuing, and all of Salem is historic, including the Point neighborhood, which is designated as a National Historic District. And then at Salem Maritime, recognizing that Salem's community is ever evolving, and what was meaningful and significant to people in our community in 1938 is very different from what people find significant today. So in order to be relevant to all of our community members, we need to tell a diversity of stories from a diversity of perspectives. And we need to reconsider the significance of our park stories. So that brings us to, as Jeanette mentioned, the Latino Heritage Internship Program, also known as LHIP. It's a national program that connects Latino students to national parks through internships. And Salem Maritime has participated in the program since 2018. And our relationship with North Shore CDC and this project really kicked off with LHIP and with two fantastic interns in 2021, Tamor and Carla. And Tamor and Carla worked with Jeanette and some other folks at North Shore CDC to develop a proposal to have the Dominican Faceless Dolls exhibit at the Salem Armory Regional Visitor Center. And so here's just a photo of Tamor and Carla with our traditional park resources. You know, there's a historic structure at Saugus where Carla is, and then Tamor is on this historic ship. And then here they are also in the point with a mock-up of a Dominican Faceless Doll statue. And so how they wrote this proposal is by identifying the connections between our traditional stories or themes and the Dominican Faceless Dolls. So as Jeanette was saying, these dolls are symbols of diversity and the coming together of multiple identities and heritage and culture. And the paper doll project that North Shore CDC has initiated is celebrating our community's connections to different parts of the world. And in Salem, that's particularly true of Caribbean connections. So if we at Salem Maritime look at how our interpretive themes relevant to our community today, obviously global connections are still influencing our culture here in Salem. And so if we ask, what do those connections look like today? And that's really the question, like, what do our global connections look like today? These paper dolls are a way for us to answer that question ourselves. So by making a paper doll, you can answer the question, what are my global connections? Or connections to other places and people and communities. And then when we can look at other people's paper dolls and learn from their experiences, from their own answers to the questions. And when we bring all of the paper dolls together, we can learn about our community. We can celebrate our community story. Oh, and those were just a few pictures to show Salem's historic connections to the Caribbean. So there is a shipping record in the middle of a Salem ship going down to Dominique in the Caribbean. And then on this picture on the left, it's a Salem Marine certificate, and there's an image of a boat in the Caribbean. So Carla and Tamor started out this program by experimenting and making their own faceless dolls. Carla made a doll inspired by her mother and her heritage. Tamor made a doll inspired by his identity and his dreams and interests. And like Jeanette said, they made a video and put some resources online to show other people how to start making these paper dolls. Then North Shore CDC and the National Park Service ran a series of community workshops to invite residents to build these dolls. And this was just a fantastic doll and one of my favorites from Jiraiya, who is a Salem Root alumni. And she was born in Uganda. And at those community workshops, we really saw those global connections come out through the different dolls and the different stories that the dolls were sharing of our community members. So the Dominican Faceless Doll exhibit opened in May of 2022, and we as a National Park Service site had a few different goals with that exhibit. One was that new audiences were going to be able to see themselves reflected in our stories. Two, we particularly wanted to connect with people in the El Punto community because we were not doing a good enough job at being relevant in that community, and previous efforts we had made weren't having the intended impact. Three, we wanted all visitors to have a chance to engage with and learn from these new narratives that we were incorporating. And four, we wanted to increase accessibility to Spanish speaking audiences. And so for that reason, the exhibit was all in the English and Spanish language. So I'll just share a couple of the panels that we had up. We had these introductory panels, which just introduced the history behind the dolls and how this project was reimagining our traditional themes. And then of course, introduced our partner who, and I should pause here and say, this exhibit was developed totally in collaboration with North Shore Community Development Coalition. So it was a project in partnership. So a panel introducing El Punto and the Punto Urban Art Museum. There were 19 paper dolls featured, and so these are just 3 of them, and they were all incredibly beautiful and personal to our community members. There were 3 dolls that were highlighted on these artist story panels. And so Jeanette had mentioned Tatiana Rivas before, and this was her doll on the left, named Don't Touch My Hair. And she wrote, you can't see it here, but we can share it later. She wrote an incredibly powerful and beautiful poem along with her doll, also named Don't Touch My Hair. And then Chantel, Alex Fernandez, and Altagracia Florian. These panels featured the stories behind their dolls and then statements about themselves as artists. And I did just pull out Chantel's panel just to give an idea of what they looked like. She wrote a statement that said, and I'll just read it because it's short, my Dominican Faceless Doll represents many stories. The feeling of being different and misunderstood, LGBTQ+ folks who migrate to America looking for hope, understanding, and support. How powerful it is to reclaim our identity. She teaches us to empower ourselves through visibility. She reminds us to free ourselves from society's beliefs about who we are. And Chantel immigrated to the United States from the Dominican Republic and settled in the Point neighborhood. And she was a student at Salem High and then later North Shore Community College. This is another story that was featured, not on a panel, but on a canvas. The doll named Rosa. This was designed by a youth build student who had at a previous workshop designed a doll to represent his heritage. And so it depicted images of the Puerto Rican flag. And he brought that doll home and his mother loved it so much that he decided to design a second doll for his mother as a Mother's Day present. And so he writes a letter to his mother on the doll in Spanish, which we just translated a few lines from. But again, just these very personal and meaningful stories told through these dolls. And these were all hung up in the visitor center for people to engage with. And so we invited people to respond to these dolls and these stories on what we called these, internally, we called them essential question panels. But basically, we put out these Post-it notes and asked people to answer questions about their own experiences. And people really responded, which was our intention. People wanted to share their stories. So the first story was identities have power. They are the labels we claim to describe ourselves. They are the labels we do not choose and others put on us. So we asked visitors to respond with pink sticky notes. How do I describe myself? These were just a few of the many, many, many responses. And they really ranged from like empowering statements to like self-deprecating statements, just very personal and honest answers. And one of my favorites was like a cynical millennial with too much student debt, which is there at the bottom. And then with green sticky notes, we asked people to respond, what's a label that someone else gives me? And again, we just got a range of responses from reliable to clingy, to caring and amazing, to uptight. So just very personal, meaningful responses. We asked people to reflect on the heritage exercise that we started out with today. And, you know, I actually just, as I was writing these slides, wished that, as always happens after the fact, like wish I could change one little thing that we wrote in the exhibit, which was instead of saying we each inherit a heritage, I wish maybe we had said we each choose our heritage. But choose the things that are important to us and make us who we are. And so these are some of the examples of dolls that people built responding to that exercise. So if you choose to follow up with this program and create your own faceless paper doll, this may be what your doll looks like. And on the second to the right, you can actually see that Puerto Rican doll that I was mentioning earlier. So, like Jeanette said, we put the LHIP interns designed some great resources for the website that we hope over time will grow, but especially great was a little video and some instructions and a template for how to create your own doll. And this is pre-North Shore CDC being able to put up their own fantastic material. And again, people responded to that and to those materials. This was a 4th grade teacher from KIPP Academy in Lynn, invited the entire 4th grade population in Lynn to create these Dominican faceless dolls for Hispanic Heritage Month. And you might be able to see she displayed them in the hallway, and she put mirrors behind each doll so you could see all the artwork on them. And we also did some staff training with these dolls to prepare a new generation and a new year of interns to engage with our community in meaningful experiences. So and then finally, we had, when the exhibit was on display this past June, we had a community celebration with exhibit artists and other community members at the Salem Armory Regional Visitor Center. So here on the right is a picture of Tatiana Altagracia and Chantel, those 3 artists on the panels who came and spoke on a panel about their experiences. And this is, I'm going to see if this video will play. Can you all hear that before I start? Can someone give me a thumbs up if you heard that?
Hit play again, Nora.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Okay.
Twist, twist, twist.
You can hear it.
Twist, twist, twist.
I can't hear it.
No, we've
Oh.
lost it twice now. That's too bad.
Well, that was a video. I'm sorry if you couldn't hear it, but that was a video of Tatiana reading her poem, Don't Touch My Hair. And like, it is, like I said, we can share that text with you and her poem later on, which is incredibly powerful, even if nothing really beats hearing her say it in person. And even if you can't hear the audio for this, this is just a video to show the joy that night. Of community members seeing their artwork and their stories in this place, and creating that space and that sense of belonging for our community members, and redefining you know, this space and who this space belongs to. So Jeanette, I think, do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, absolutely. And what I wanted to say is that that video of people dancing, like I had a lot of the residents approach me and say, you know, I've never been inside this building before, and it's so good to be able to see like something I can recognize. And I'm hearing like merengue, which is like music from my culture here, and I feel so welcome. They learned about the other exhibits that they have in the space as well. So it's a touching moment to see the community being represented and invited into a space like this one. So it was really great to be able to put them up on the wall and treat them as a respected artist. I just want to say also that although this exhibit is no longer at Salem Maritime, they have so kindly loaned us the exhibit, and it's actually up at our community space on Congress Street called Espacio, and it's open to the public and also to our partners. So if you want to see the exhibit, you're able to go see it any day of the week as well. I'm happy to be a contact for that as well. Next slide. And so then our goal is, again, this is the beginning, making parks feel like having parks belong, having the community members in the Point neighborhood have a sense of belonging in the parks, and calling them out to nature. And we've been able to really see people just put their heart out there and get creative and tell stories. Just recently, we put together a call for art, where we had 3 prizes, to $500 prizes for the community members. And when we asked people to share stories to a faceless doll, we had 30 submissions throughout Massachusetts. So it was open to people from all around Massachusetts, and we received an incredible amount of dolls. They're really beautiful, and their stories are really impactful as well. We actually have, today is the last day that we're doing community voting for the dolls. And we also would like to invite you to participate and read those stories, and also cast your vote for your favorite one doll. And tomorrow we'll be announcing the winners. And if you want to go to the next slide, Nora. Yeah, this was a workshop we did at a senior center in Pioneer Terrace, which is right next to Palmer Cove Park. And the seniors had a really great time dedicating it to past loved ones, or the American culture here. This one lady wanted to express her love for gardening, and she created one with cabbage and carrots, because that's what she grows during the summer in her garden. So it's very exciting to see how some people were so super simple or very deep with their stories that they were sharing. Next slide. So if you have your phone at hand, or we will also be able to share this link on the chat, and you can read the 10 stories, the 10 finalists. They're in Spanish and English for the audience to read, and you can vote on your favorite doll. This is kind of like the one last workshop and one last encouragement to get people to participate and tell stories, because from this kind of like group of dolls that we have created over the last year and a half, we'll be curating large sculptures that will reflect some of these stories, and that will be placed in the parks and around the neighborhood. Next slide. And hopefully, this is kind of like a mock-up of what these sculptures could potentially look like if they're curated by artists and placed on parks. We imagine that this would be a beautiful lineup of large sculptures of Dominican faceless dolls. I also, and so in Spanish, Annie, to kind of like help with the pronunciation. In Spanish, it is Muñecas sin Rostro. Muñecas sin Rostro. And I actually have a few dolls here that I wanted to kind of like share with you, that I brought back from the Dominican Republic on my recent trip. I don't know if we can stop the sharing so you can see the screen a little bit larger. But this one is just holding a basket here. I don't know if you can see that. And I love that you can tell like where the pottery worker made indents on the dress here. Closer. You can kind of see the indents of the hand here. You can tell it's very personal made. Like there's no machines here. This is you know, all handmade. This one is in green. She's holding a basket. This one actually, look at how innovative they are, but this one actually has a hole here, so you can put a candle under here, and the kind of like the smoke or the scent will come out through these little star shapes here. So this is like a scented doll, and she's holding a little pot right here, a little ceramic pot. She's got a sunny hat and it's pink, and you can tell again the fingerprints here working around the dress. A very unique. This one's one of my favorite ones. She's tiny, but as you can see, she's holding her belly because she's pregnant. So they're representing a mom here. And she's got a prudent little bun in the back with a rose in her hair. And she's holding her belly. This one of the few ones I found with the darker skin tone, which is beautiful. And she's got a long braid on the side. I'm not sure what the shape represents. It's a different shape than the other ones I showed you. She's a lot shorter compared to other ones. So you can see that they vary also in sizes. I think she's got a little button right here. And then finally, this was the last one that I found, but this one's a little girl. And she's sitting on some sort of rock or stone. She's got a little bit of grass on the side. She's got her legs crossed, so she actually has feet in this version. You can see her little feet are crossed there. And she's holding a little bouquet of flowers. She's got a little very cute bow on top. So you can see that at the hands of a different person, they can end up looking different and being different age and representing different people. So it's very exciting to see that this one simple project has pulled so much out of the creators and the artists and made people be storytellers through artwork. So I think that's all that we have for today. If you guys have any questions about the project, the link is just shared on the chat, and we would love for everybody to in this meeting to cast their vote for their favorite one. Oh, thank you.
This is great.
Yeah,
So this link is will take you to the different dolls you can vote on, because I couldn't get the QR code to work off of pointing in at the television. I think there's too much interference from the television. But this link that you just put in will work. Oh, very cool. Well, I was going to ask you what other plans you have, but it sounds like you have a lot of plans. Everything from paper dolls to full larger than life statues. how are you doing with, are other groups picking this up? Are you mostly the ones that are going out and doing it, or do you have other groups that are, in this region and also other parts of the country that are starting to get inspired by this?
So as of right now in our website, we have all of the resources that people can download. I will also copy that into the chat. We have officially launched our Muñecas en Rostro page in our under Punto Urban Art Museum. There's a video there that allows you to see how it is done. You can download the template, you can print it and make it at home. And our goal is to kind of like pass this on to other communities, like the exhibit. We're currently working on an exhibit that will be able to be loaned to other organizations. And our prerequisite is, would you have a workshop with your community and build some dolls and tell some stories, so that they also, this kind of like idea lives on and carries on. And our goal is that anyone can, anywhere in the world, can online download this and participate and learn about the culture found in Salem, in the Dominican Republic, and beyond.
Oh, very interesting. I think, are you finding any resistance from men getting involved? I saw a couple guys did it, but a lot of women doing it. Both sexes kind of embracing this or not?
Well, so far we've had male participants work on it, and they honor their mother or someone that they care. But also we've also said, here, full disclaimer, if you would like to create your doll in a different, showing a male figure too, you're welcome to. As a matter of fact, a few people that submitted for the competition also did that, and we gave people freedom to deviate, but we wanted to honor the original doll, but we asked people to also curate and think outside the box in the way that they wanted to portray their doll. I think one of the boys that created the doll at the beginning, he put a gold chain on it and a mohawk on the doll's head. And that was so fun to see him just kind of like not find himself restricted, but also finding opportunities to make it fun in his own. Like he put like a pipe cleaner around the neck that was, I was like, yeah, that's the gold chain. And then she's cool. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is exciting. So far we have not seen limitations for both. Or anyone who wants to portray the doll so far.
So do we have any other questions? Anybody else want to ask a question? You can probably unmute yourself and ask. Don't want to discourage anybody. Now I'll ask another one, which is these the larger than life ones, the look like they're made out of metal or something. That's very ambitious. Do you have an idea how you're going to bring that project to fruition?
Yeah, it's going to be fiberglass built, and they're going to be potentially building a fiberglass shop. It's actually not in Massachusetts, but they will be shipped here and installed. And we will be having a call for art for local artists to reinterpret this story, some of these stories, and paint them on the larger scale. So a few of the dolls will represent some of the stories. So then we're excited to share it to some people. Hey, by the way, your story is featured on doll number 5 or 6, and it's going to be located here, and seeing them just come to see it and have that moment of like re-encountering that story on a larger scale, and also seeing the community members being the advocate for that park by telling people, go see my sculpture, come, I'm going to bring my friends to see this. And the community members then become also the people who make sure that this project gets seen and shared. And that's very valuable to us because it feels like it is community made and community representative.
And so will the artists be selected from the communities, the local communities, or is it a call for artists all over? I know some of the murals are from artists from South America and stuff. So I'm just curious, how do you see this happening?
I think it will be a collaboration between local artists and maybe international, maybe some Dominican artists too that will love to invite. But we will be putting a call for art for our local artists that will either interpret their own stories of heritage or perhaps represent some of these stories that are collected through the paper doll projects.
Great. Any other questions? It was so interesting. Well, thank you so much. I knew something about it. And I did go to the exhibit when it was opening, but learned a lot tonight, and very, very exciting, very interesting, very innovative. So thank you so much. And what a great collaboration between the Park Service and the CDC, and all the work that Jeanette, that you've done, and Nora, to really pull it off. So good luck with expanding it. I'm sure it will. A lot of enthusiasm there. So I think we're going to see a lot more dolls in our future. So thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us, and this will be available. We'll send it to everybody that signed up for this program.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you.
And maybe we'll do it again next year when we get more dolls going and larger ones. This is great. Well, thanks. Good night, everybody.